$2.90. That is, supposedly, the reason that police officers in New York City, my city, shot 4 different people, including one of their own officers yesterday. And y'all think that we don't already live under fascistic conditions. Grow up. Beyond the terrorizing everyone, beyond actually severely injuring people, there will be no consequences for any of these officers. The people who weren't shot, who are supposedly fine, but are literally terrified and now have trauma related to this incident, they're not even going to be considered in the effects of stuff like this on our society, on the world as a whole. This is the reason I continue to stay out of all the electoral discussions, because most of y'all, whoever you plan to vote for, have not really wrestled with the fact that the machinery of our country, I'm not talking about who the particular politicians are, the machinery of our country, the machinery of our cities is inherently fascistic or totalitarian or whatever word makes you comfortable with acknowledging the reality. I bring up the Bloomberg stop and frisk era a whole lot because, to me, it most exemplifies the kind of world, the kind of society that people imagine when they think of fascism. And it happened in the city that, like, every conservative is terrified of because it's supposedly the most, far left place in the world. But in the stop and frisk era, there were 5,081,689 stops in the 12 years of the Bloomberg stop and frisk era. 44% or 43.8% of all of these stops, the reasons that police gave for walking up to people in a supposedly free society and accosting them was furtive movements. That's it. They just walked up to people on the street and said, "You're moving strangely. I'm now going to interrupt your day, make you show me your ID, put you up against the wall, frisk you, physically make you feel terribly uncomfortable, maybe actually assault you a little bit or a lot. And whether or not anything happens from this, you're going to feel shitty and nothing supposedly is going to happen to you. And this is what happens in a free society." And and I know that this wasn't just everybody in the city equally getting a chance to be stopped and frisked, right? If there was 5 million stop and frisks in that period, we would think that almost everybody in the city got a taste. And that's not true. It was predominantly in Black and brown neighborhoods. And in fact, Brownsville, the neighborhood where that train station was in, where they shot up everybody yesterday, was one of the places that was stopped the most. Total stops by precinct as a percentage of population, Brownsville, that same area, 237% of the stops. And predominantly Black and brown people. This information is available on the nyclu.org website. You can go there and find it all yourself. They have a really well laid out, it's got graphs, it's got, stops by precinct, it's got outcomes. And by the way, of those 5 million stops, 90% of them completely innocent. So these people hadn't done anything. And even if they had, they shouldn't have been approached on the street, but that's a whole different story. But these people hadn't done anything. So their lives, maybe they were late to wherever they had to go. Maybe they felt violated. Maybe they now have longstanding trauma. But there's no redress for that. What do you call that? What do you call that when citizens in a country can be stopped by officers of the state? We're not calling them peace officers. We're not calling them any of their propaganda names. When they can be stopped by agents of the state and made to give account for themselves. What do you call that? And then people wonder why we connect the struggles here to struggles in the Middle East, when the NYPD literally goes and trains there with the same people. So how is that not connected when it's literally practically connected? And another connection. Over there, only certain people get to suffer under the boot of the IOF. Here, during the stop and frisk era, using the same stats that we've been talking about, 90% of the people who were stopped, of those 5 million people, were Black and brown people. Only 10% of those people were white people. Now, that doesn't really sound right, because for that to make sense, 90% of the people in the city would have to be Black or brown. And that's not even close to true. It's sometimes said that fascism is just like imperialism coming back home. And I want to expand that a little bit because in all societies that are imperialist, there's always an internal faction of people who are the testing grounds, the proving grounds, the internal proving grounds. And that expands as things get rougher, right? During 2020, we saw that everybody who was involved in the George Floyd uprisings, no matter what you look like, no matter what your social standing or your ethnicity, et cetera, everybody could get got for standing and fighting against the state. Everybody. So it is imperialism coming home, but it's also just the same systems of control expanding to more sectors. Anybody who is not in the vulture class can get it. Anybody. And even some of the people who are, if they get caught out of area and they have the wrong skin color. If you don't have the complexion for the protection and you get caught out there by some agent of the state who doesn't know who you are, your money isn't going to help you. It's like trying to catch a cab late at night being black. You could have $35 billion in the bank, but if that cabbie is anti-black, you're going to raise your hand and get nothing. Now, who is piloting the machinery of a fascist state matters to some degree, but in the end, we have to contend with the fact that this is all untenable. If police can just open fire and shoot 4 people over $2.90, you are not free. Doesn't matter what you look like or how much money you have or your skin tone or whatever, you are not free. You could have been there in that station just passing by, just going from one place to the other. Maybe the train stopped and you just had to get off. There is any reason that you could have been right there. And if those conditions can exist for anyone, then we are all not free. Even though it's mostly contained in black and brown neighborhoods, and most of y'all have ignored that for most of your lives because of what? Anti-blackness. Anti-blackness is one of the foundational sins of this system and interplays with all the other systems, right? All the systems play together. And that's why we can't be single issue about any of this. If it is possible to be shot over $2.90 and a verbal altercation with someone who's supposedly keeping the peace, you live in a fascist society. That is not hyperbole. It is simply a flat statement of fact. And if you recognize that, then you'll be more ready for what we really need to do, regardless of what happens in November.